On August 13, 1981, one man made a decision that seemed completely harmless. Leaving his car in an unauthorized parking spot for a few hours, what could be easier? A typical decision for a thrifty person. The price of this decision turned out to be monstrous. 7 human lives. Hamburger Dam, one of Germany's largest fairgrounds and a place of joy for millions of visitors, witnessed the worst disaster in its centuries-long history that night. Destroyed gondolas 50 feet in the air, screams of horror instead of enthusiastic laughter, young lives cut short in an instant. The cause of the tragedy was not a technical failure, a natural disaster, or malicious intent. It was just one fatal mistake, one machine in the wrong place at the wrong time, one assumption instead of a proven fact. To understand how a routine decision turned into a death sentence for 7 people, we need to go back to that August evening when one man's confidence collided with harsh reality. Hamburger Dam is one of Germany's largest fun fairs, which 3 times a year transforms the Heiligengeistfeld Square into an ocean of bright lights and adrenaline. Millions of visitors, dozens of attractions, an atmosphere of unbridled fun until late at night. On August 13, 1981, the usual festive bustle reigned here. Families with children, couples in love, groups of friends, everyone was looking for thrills before the fair closed. The Bee Gees' Massachusetts was playing over the loudspeakers, a melody that will forever remain etched in the memories of the survivors. The center of attraction for thrill seekers was Skylab, a huge wheel with 20 gondolas capable of lifting people 50 feet into the air and spinning them in an almost vertical plane. There were no safety belts, only the centrifugal force between the passenger and death. It was this proximity to danger that attracted the crowds. A few feet away from Skylab was another popular attraction, the catapult. It was a high-speed loop that accelerated people to 80 miles per hour in 4 seconds. 2 attractions, 2 operators, no coordination between them. This disconnect would be the key to the tragedy, because in a world where people's lives depend on every decision, even the simplest mistakes come at a terrible price. Norbert Vita, a 26-year-old operator of the catapult attraction, spent the entire day battling a technical malfunction. Vita was a well-known figure in the fairground industry, an ambitious entrepreneur whom his colleagues called the king of showmen. His reputation depended on the flawless operation of every mechanism, but on that day, the gearbox failed. The catapult stood motionless, losing profit with every passing hour. Vita made the only sensible decision, to use a telescopic crane to remove and replace the faulty part. By evening, the repair was complete. The massive truck with the telescopic crane had done its job. The gearbox was removed, repaired, and reinstalled. Catapult was once again ready to delight visitors. And then Vita made a decision that seemed perfectly logical. Why waste time cleaning up the crane right now? The fair closes at 1 a.m., and the neighboring Skylab has probably already stopped working. We can safely leave the equipment until morning and clean up in daylight. The 90-foot telescopic boom froze in the night sky at an angle, crossing the fairgrounds. Vita didn't even glance at Skylab. He was absolutely certain that his assumptions were correct. This confidence came at a price that 7 innocent people would have to pay. The price of one rash decision is always higher than it seems. At the same time, 23-year-old Vincenzo Maniscalco was ending a normal evening with an unusual decision. He had come to the fair to pick up his wife from work and planned to go straight home. But his wife was late, and time was passing slowly. Skylab caught his attention with its bright lights and the sounds of its mechanisms. The staff announced the last ride of the evening. Maniscalco checked the time, 12:54 a.m., and made a spontaneous decision to spend 2.5 German marks on a ticket, a simple impulse that would save his life and make him a key witness to the tragedy. The Skylab gondolas filled with the last daredevils of the evening. Among the passengers were 18-year-old friends, Sigrid Christensen and Gabi Litkowitz, who had come to celebrate their graduation, and the extreme attraction was to be the highlight of the holiday. Couples settled into the spacious gondolas with their children. Lone thrill seekers took the seats at the edge. None of them knew that a steel trap was waiting just a few feet away from their future trajectory. By that time, Vita had already left the repair site, confident that he had made the right decision. At 12:54 a.m., Skylab began its final cycle. The wheel slowly turned, and the gondolas gradually tilted away from the vertical. The passengers felt the centrifugal force increasing. It was for this feeling of flight that they had paid their money. The hydraulic mechanism began to lift the entire structure, bringing the rotation to an almost vertical plane. The gondolas gained altitude, 16 feet, 32, 50. Vincenzo thought of his wife and hoped she wouldn't be angry about his being late. Sigrid and Gabby squealed with delight, anticipating adult life. The distance between the gondolas and the crane decreased with each rotation. At 12:56 a.m., there was a collision. Seconds decide everything. One machine left behind, one wrong assumption, one unchecked certainty. Metal met metal at speed, and the price of Vit's decision was paid instantly. The crane's telescopic boom tore through the lower parts of several gondolas, like a can opener cutting through tin cans. The impact was so powerful that the entire Skylab structure shook and creaked. Cries of delight turned to screams of horror. The gondola passengers, deprived of their floor, fell 50 feet onto the concrete surface of the fairground. Vincenzo Maniscalco survived by a miracle. He managed to grab the side rails when the lower part of his gondola was cut off. For Sigrid and Gabby, the celebration of their coming of age was their last. 7 people paid with their lives for the confidence of one. The emergency stop kicked in a few seconds later, but it was too late. The area under the Skylab was littered with debris from the destroyed gondolas and the bodies of the people who had fallen. 16 were injured. 7 died. 6 at the scene, the 7th in the hospital. The festive music fell silent. The Hamburger Dom froze in horror. Norbert Witt was arrested that same night. The investigation quickly determined the cause of the disaster: a telescopic crane left in a dangerous position. All the evidence pointed to the negligence of the catapult operator, who was the last person to operate the lifting mechanism. But Vita had no intention of admitting guilt without a fight. His version of events sounded convincing. Skylab staff had grossly violated the work schedule and started the attraction after the official closing time at 1 a.m. Moreover, the operators were drunk and out of control. According to Vita, he was the first to reach the control panel and press the emergency stop button in an attempt to prevent an even greater disaster. He had set up the crane precisely because he was sure that Skylab was already closed, as required by the rules. The version seemed logical. If Skylab had indeed been operating after 1 a.m., the blame would have fallen entirely on its staff, but it was necessary to prove the exact time of the last trip. The testimony of the surviving passengers was used. Most did not remember the details. The shock of the disaster had erased many of their memories. Some said, around 1 o'clock, others, maybe after midnight. The uncertainty played into Vita's defense. Maybe he was right after all. Maybe the real culprits were drunk operators who violated the work schedule. Then Vincenzo Maniscalco was called to the stand. The young man gave testimony that destroyed the entire defense strategy. He clearly remembered checking the time before getting into the gondola. He was worried that his wife would be waiting too long for him. The ride began at exactly 12:54 a.m., 6 minutes before the official closing time. But the defense did not give up. Vita's lawyers attacked the reliability of this testimony. Can you be absolutely sure of the time after such a shock? Couldn't you have been wrong by a few minutes? Maniscalco replied simply, I remember that time better than my own name. Because at exactly 00:54, my life was divided into before and after. Skylab was operating within its approved schedule. There were no violations on the part of the attraction staff. All responsibility fell on Norbert Vita, who left the crane in a dangerous position. relying on assumptions instead of facts. The court found Witt guilty of manslaughter and negligent bodily harm. The sentence was 1 year's probation. For the 7 lives lost, the punishment seemed laughably lenient. But this was only the beginning of the reckoning. Insurance companies refused to cover the damage. The disaster had been caused by clear negligence. The families of the deceased and the injured filed lawsuits for millions of marks. Witt was forced to sell everything: attractions, equipment, personal property. The price of one decision turned out to be not only human, but also financial. The former king of showmen lost absolutely everything. The lives of those involved in the tragedy took completely different paths. Vincenzo Maniscalco, whose testimony decided the outcome of the trial, suffered severe psychological consequences. The young man endured countless sleepless nights, tormented by memories of the sound of metal tearing and the screams of falling people. It took years to recover. Maniscalco couldn't look at amusement park rides without having panic attacks. Even the sound of the mechanisms working made him break out in a cold sweat. It was only after several years that he was able to overcome his trauma and start riding fairground rides again. Over time, he found his calling as a tour guide and comedian known as the Night Watchman of St. Pauli. His ability to cope with his nightmare and return to life became an example of incredible strength of spirit. Norbert Witte took a completely different path, a downward one. Bankruptcy was only the first link in a chain of misfortunes. His attempt to revive his career failed. After German reunification, he bought an abandoned amusement park in East Berlin, but the venture proved unprofitable. In desperation, the former king of showmen got involved with drug dealers and was arrested for drug smuggling. 7 years in prison broke him completely. After his release, Witte was left with no means of support. His reputation was destroyed, his connections lost, his health ruined. The man who once ran prestigious attractions and was considered a star of the industry ended his life in poverty, scraping by with odd jobs. One decision destroyed not only 7 other people's lives, but his own as well. Hamburger Dom survived the darkest chapter in its history and continued to operate. The fair is still held 3 times a year, attracting millions of visitors. In the more than 40 years since the disaster, there has not been a single incident of comparable magnitude. The tragedy led to invisible but important changes. Coordination between the operators of various attractions was radically improved. Modern safety standards require a strict separation of attraction and maintenance areas. What was possible in 1981, leaving a crane next to a working attraction, is now out of the question. But the price of these lessons was monstrous. 7 young lives is too high a price to pay for understanding that in the world of entertainment, there are no small details. There are no official memorials to the victims of the disaster. The names of Sigrid Christensen, Gabi Litkowitz, and the 5 others who died live on only in newspaper archives, court documents, and the memories of the few who witnessed that terrible night. Today, music plays again on Heiligengeistfeld Square. The rides are running again, and children are laughing again. The Hamburger Dom is alive, as if that terrible night never happened. Vincenzo Maniscalco sometimes comes here with tour groups. He tells tourists stories about old Hamburg, but never mentions that August evening in 1981. Some memories are better left in the past. Norbert Witte died in obscurity, broken by the weight of 7 lives. The man who wanted to be king of the fairground industry ended his days forgotten by all. And somewhere in the archives lie documents with the names of the 7 victims. Sigrid Christensen, 18 years old. Gabi Litkowitz, 18 years old. 5 others whose names are known only to relatives and friends. They did not die because of a malfunctioning ride, not because of a natural disaster, not because of malicious intent. They died because one person made a simple decision without considering the consequences. Because confidence replaced caution. Because assumptions proved more important than facts. In a world where lives depend on every choice, there are no harmless decisions. This story took place more than 40 years ago, but the lessons of the Hamburger Dam disaster are still relevant today. In our world, where technology is becoming increasingly complex and responsibility is growing, every decision can have unpredictable consequences. We live in an age where a single programmer's mistake can paralyze entire cities, where one wrong decision can cost thousands of lives. The story of Norbert Witte and the 7 people who died is a reminder that behind every choice we make are real people with real lives. Sometimes all it takes is one check to prevent a tragedy, one phone call, 1 minute of attention. The price of that minute could be priceless. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story made you think, please like and subscribe to the channel. Take care and see you in the next episodes.